And we're kicking off with WWE, and with the company traveling to Saudi Arabia next Friday, the November 3rd Smackdown was taped in advance this week, and the show furthered the build towards LA Knight's match with Roman Reigns. During the show that will air on November 3rd, Knight had plenty to say as he addressed Reigns, and it seems he took a dig at one of WWE's most popular stars in the process. He said, "You know what, you gotta be feeling pretty unbeatable right now, don't you? I mean, let's face it, you've beaten everybody, haven't you? You've beaten just about everybody that stood in front of you, but you don't understand. I ain't coming at you from the same angles everybody else did. I'm not here to finish something. You don't understand, I'm here to start something. Yeah, I'm here to start the LA Knight era." Knight's comment about not being here to finish something is obviously a nod to Cody Rhodes, whose plans to finish the story at WrestleMania 39 were snuffed out by Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa this past April. During an episode of SmackDown earlier this month, Rhodes and Reigns had a brief face-to-face, with the message being clear that Cody still intends on finishing his story. Will it be Rhodes who dethrones Roman Reigns, perhaps at WrestleMania 40, or will LA Knight leave Riyadh with the gold next week? Give your predictions down below. One name countless fans want to see face Roman Reigns is The Rock, who was at one point locked into a match with Reigns for this year's WrestleMania before plans fell through. On an episode of The Pat McAfee Show, The Rock said he was still open to the match, and fans could finally see the showdown to end all showdowns next year. Fans have been wondering whether it'll be Reigns Rock or Reigns Cody at next year's WrestleMania, but according to BWE, both matches are in the works. The report adds that one match will come at WrestleMania 40, while the other will happen at WWE's November 2024 event in Saudi Arabia, but it's unclear which match will be on which show. The report also noted that Reigns is not scheduled to compete at WWE Elimination Chamber in Perth, despite this being a stadium show and WWE's first PLE in Australia since 2018. The Rock vs. Roman Reigns is a dream match, but fans remain eager to see Cody finish the story, and which match would you rather see close out WrestleMania 40 next April? In less than a month, WWE will hold its annual Survivor Series, one of the biggest shows of the year, but WWE's biggest star will not be at the event. It's been previously reported that Roman Reigns is not expected to be at the show, with his next TV match after Crown Jewel expected to be next year, and this just shows Reigns' backstage influence. On Wrestling Observer Radio, it was noted that Reigns has obvious leverage, as it'd be hard to think of anyone else who could make the choice to not compete at such a big event. When Reigns signed his lucrative contract last year, it was expected that he wouldn't work B-tier events, but would work at least the Big Four, which has made his status for Survivor Series such a surprise. With or without Reigns, Survivor Series will be a stacked show, with many expecting the return of Randy Orton. But whatever happens in Chicago, it'll go ahead without Roman Reigns. More from next week's SmackDown as John Cena was on the show, building his upcoming match with Solo Sikoa, but one line from Big Match John has had fans talking. In his promo, Cena name-dropped a former WWE superstar, who, like Sikoa, is known for being tough, but this ex-superstar is now a part of AEW. Cena said, "We all know the only reason you got a job here is because of your cousin. We all see you walking around thinking you're some big badass enforcer, but you're nothing but a bargain basement Taz ripoff." Cena hasn't won a singles match on TV since 2018, a record he looks to break when he faces Sikoa in Riyadh, and do you think Big Match John will get the big win at Crown Jewel next week? Now, this week's SmackDown that went out live didn't air on Fox, but rather FS1, thanks to Fox coverage being reserved for the 2023 MLB World Series. As expected, the combination of the move and the World Series saw SmackDown's viewership plummet, but there was a silver lining to this sharp drop in the audience. According to Alfred Kanua, the October 27th episode of WWE SmackDown drew an overnight viewership of 1.077 million, with 414,000 from the coveted 18 to 49 demographic. That is a massive drop from the previous week's 2.253 million, but both the ratings and demographic figures for the October 28th show were up from the last time the Blue brand was on FS1. WWE SmackDown will return to Fox next week, but with the results already available online, it'll be interesting to see what kind of viewership the final show before Crown Jewel gets. Over to AEW, and on this week's Dynamite, Bryan Danielson took plenty of punishment during the main event, including an orange punch from Orange Cassidy and a Rainmaker from the debuting Kazuchika Okada. Danielson was seen clutching his face after these moves and was attended to by AEW officials as Dynamite went off the air, and Tony Khan would later tweet that Danielson left the arena under his own power. On last night's Collision, Claudio Castagnoli provided an update on Danielson's condition, revealing that he had suffered a broken orbital bone, but wasn't sure when exactly the injury happened. Whether it was caused by Cassidy or Okada, Claudio vowed revenge and made it clear that he would find Okada, whether it is in the United States or in Okada's native Japan. As for Orange Cassidy, Castagnoli revealed that he will challenge for the AEW International title on next week's Dynamite, and Tony Schiavone mentioned that Danielson could be out for the rest of the year, though an exact timeline for a return remains unclear. Given Bryan Danielson's injury and the potential for his extended absence from AEW, how do you think this will impact the ongoing storylines and matchups within the promotion, and who do you see stepping up to fill the void during his absence? We know that Danielson only plans to wrestle full-time for another year or so, but with his history of injuries, should he be looking at retiring now? Sound off in the comments below. It was last month that WWE and UFC officially merged to launch TKO Group Holdings, and at this week's Boxing Fight Night in Saudi Arabia, there were plenty of names from sports entertainment. Days before WWE hosts its own Saudi event, Vince McMahon and The Undertaker was spotted in Saudi for the Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou fight, and McMahon had plenty to say about the UFC. WWE's been coming here for a long time, actually. No one else actually aside from that. If this were a UFC event, it would be no different. But nonetheless, Francis Ngannou in PFL is getting knocked out. The UFC is so superior to the PFL that there's no contest. Vince McMahon then went on to say that if Fury allows him, Ngannou is getting knocked out in the second round. And while Fury won, it wasn't this early on. Ngannou, representing the Professional Fighters League, lost to Fury via a split decision and was even able to put Fury on the mat in the third round with a left hook. The fight took place at Boulevard Hall and was accompanied by various spectacular performances and musical acts in addition to a star-studded audience. Mike Tyson, who helped Ngannou train for the fight, Eminem, Conor McGregor, and Kanye West all attended the fight, as did someone fans thought would be at Crown Jewel, Cristiano Ronaldo. As for McMahon, he was seen using a cane, just as he had when addressing WWE employees following the corporate layoffs not too long ago, and is likely in use following his life-altering back surgery from earlier this year. During his time in Saudi Arabia, McMahon expressed his excitement about the fight and praised Saudi Arabia's dedication to both combat sports and entertainment, claiming WWE has a home in the country. Everything they're doing is so much. They're delving into the superior aspects of all sports entertainment. There is nothing going to bring everything that is the best in the world. It's going to be here. This is our home now. This has been pronounced. This is our home, WWE's home. The Undertaker also shared his positive sentiments about Saudi Arabia, saying the nation has a dedication to delivering outstanding experiences for fans. McMahon may be 78, using a cane and out of WWE's creative team, but he has no plans to retire ever again, and this week's Fight Night made for a rare public outing for the controversial billionaire. At a recent indie event for Lucha Vavoom in Los Angeles, Ronda Rousey made her surprise return to wrestling, teaming with Marina Shafir to beat Taya Valkyrie and Brian Kendrick. This marked Rousey's first match since SummerSlam, which Rousey had told WWE was when she wanted to finish her run with the company, but we haven't seen the last of Rousey in the ring. Wrestling Revolver has announced that the former Raw and SmackDown Women's Champion will debut for the promotion at next month's Unreal event, with part of the ticket proceeds going to help Maui wildfire relief. In case it wasn't obvious enough that Rousey has finished her time with WWE, Rousey's profile on WWE.com has been moved from the active section to the alumni section, joining countless other ex-superstars. Are you excited to see Rousey return to wrestling, or would you rather see her back in the UFC? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. In February 2024, Will Ospreay's contract with New Japan will expire, and it's no secret that WWE has had their eye on the aerial assassin. Of course, WWE isn't the only party interested, as Ospreay has connections with AEW and New Japan, but what kind of future could Will look forward to as a WWE superstar? On Wrestling Observer Radio, it was reported that an idea within WWE is for NXT Europe to be built around Ospreay, but there are several questions coming up about that plan. It's unclear how much it'll cost for WWE to sign Ospreay, and there are also questions about NXT Europe and when exactly the brand will launch after being delayed from its initial 2023 starting point. What we do know is that Endeavor has given WWE the green light to pursue Ospreay when the time is right, and that if Will is willing to move to the US, that could increase his value dramatically. Will Ospreay obviously has a big decision ahead of him, but it's one only he can make. And where do you expect the IWGP UK Heavyweight Champion to go next? Sound off in the comments. If you've been following the news in the US, you'll know that another mass shooting took place recently, which tragically left 18 dead and 13 injured in Lewiston, Maine. Now, the Limitless Wrestling promotion has announced that their First Blood event, which was set to happen in Yarmouth, Maine, has been cancelled and shared a GoFundMe to help those affected by the shooting. According to a report by CNN, one of the shooters was found dead recently, with the death being the result of a self-inflicted wound. It's a shame that such a tragedy has taken place, and fans understand why the wrestling event has been cancelled at this difficult time, and we're wishing the best to all of those affected by this shooting. Over to AEW Collision, and Samoa Joe is in action against Rhett Titus, who's been an ROH regular since the brand's return under Tony Khan. This was an ROH World TV title match, which continues the trend of ROH titles not being defended on ROH shows, and this very one-sided affair saw Joe retain his gold. Collision also saw Ricky Starks beat Dax Harwood, only for the lights to go out and for Julia Hart to make her return to TV in her first appearance since marrying Lee Johnson. The lights went out again and the House of Black were now in the ring, but then LFI's music played, and after they emerged, a brawl quickly ensued. Hart's return to AEW adds a bit more star power, as she is becoming a breakout star, and while she didn't win the TBS title at WrestleDream, championship gold in her future may be inevitable. Claudio Castagnoli picked up perhaps the most dominant win of the night, as he defeated Hot Sauce Tracy Williams in a mere 43 seconds ahead of next week's international title match. The main event of Collision saw Kenny Omega challenge AEW World Champion MJF mere days before MJF breaks the record for the longest title reign. A match that could headline any AEW pay-per-view, having the bout on Collision was a welcome surprise, and with over 30 minutes left when the introductions took place, the pair were given plenty of time. A technical exchange at the start gave way to MJF using moves he almost never uses, like the running moonsault out of the ring, and the champ played to the crowd, who gave him plenty in return. Other than this being just another episode of Collision, everything about the presentation of the match felt big, with both men giving their A-game to ensure a positive response from the fans. Easily one of the best matches in Collision's short history, there were points where it seemed like a title change would happen, and perhaps it would have if not for Don Callis. Arriving with a screwdriver as Omega was preparing to hit his finisher, the ref ejected Callis, but the distraction gave MJF enough time to recover. Using some of Adam Cole's moves before hitting the Heat Seeker, MJF earned one of the biggest wins of his career and will soon be breaking the record for the longest reign as AEW's World Champion. Collision also saw Hikaru Shida put her women's title on the line, and not only did the champ dressed as Resident Evil's Ada Wong retain, but she broke the 19-match undefeated streak of Abadon. After the match, Timeless Toni Storm emerged and once again stole the spotlight, as she did so on Dynamite this week, and Storm hopes to become a 3-time champion herself when they face off at Full Gear. Jay White continued to pick up momentum ahead of his world title match at Full Gear, as he earned a victory over AR Fox on Collision. This match was more competitive than it needed to be, but with Fox barely being on TV in recent weeks and White the #1 contender for the world title, the result was never in question. White wasn't the only Bullet Club Gold member victorious, as the Guns defeated Dalton Castle's boys in what was little more than a squash match. This week's Collision was mostly business as usual, but the main event helped elevate the show above the norm. MJF shaking hands with the ref and Omega to end the show signified his babyface turn and gave the show a great sign-off moment, but there were other highlights. Shida vs. Abadon was solid, as was Starks vs. Harwood, and while the squash matches helped fill some time, it's these 3 matches that fans will be talking about. MJF will soon be the longest reigning AEW World Champion, but between Jay White and Samoa Joe making it clear he's still on the hunt, his title reign remains in jeopardy. MJF vs. Omega may have been an easy match of the night, but the show once again struggled to sell tickets, as has been the norm for Collision. WrestleTix reported shortly before the show that there were still tickets available out of the seating layout that accommodated for 4,177 fans. It was said that perhaps the underwhelming sales were because of the significantly higher prices compared to usual tickets, with lower bowl seating ranging from $86 to $125. Collision has struggled to fill arenas, with photos of dozens upon dozens of empty seats becoming worryingly common, and while this week's show delivered an epic main event, there were still plenty of spare seats at the show. Now, WWE and UFC's merger changed the combat sports landscape, so it shouldn't be a surprise that huge money deals have come from this merger. It's been confirmed that Saudi Arabia will host a UFC Fight Night event next March in what was no doubt a huge money deal, one that came about thanks to the aid of Vince McMahon. Middle East TV channel beIN Sports has claimed that McMahon's relationship with the Saudi government played a role in UFC securing this deal, which is akin to WWE's ongoing arrangement with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has reportedly been interested in MMA in the past and made a huge offer to Khabib Nurmagomedov to come out of retirement, but Nurmagomedov decided against it. McMahon's relationship with Saudi Arabia helped UFC close a similar big money deal mere weeks after TKO Group Holdings was officially launched with the merger of UFC and WWE. As part of TKO, McMahon has been appointed executive chairman and is expected to have a role in UFC's daily operations, but as we've seen, Ari Emanuel is the one who's ultimately in charge. UFC CEO Dana White confirmed McMahon's active involvement, describing him as a valuable partner who has already made significant contributions to the UFC brand. There was a time when the idea of McMahon selling WWE seemed improbable, but we now exist in unprecedented times, though these times have allowed UFC to score a major deal thanks to McMahon. More from McMahon now, as this time last year, the idea that he'd be working with Dana White or working with WWE again at all seemed impossible given his retirement. Now though, McMahon is back in his corporate office and working alongside White, who remains in charge of UFC, and one legend of the ring finds this very funny. Speaking to MMA Junkie ahead of Fury and Ngannou's fight, The Undertaker was asked for his thoughts on McMahon and White working together. He said, "I think it's hilarious. They're so similar, the both of them. All due respect, they're very similar. They say what's on their mind. They're both really good businessmen, and they definitely want the best for each of their brands." McMahon, who was also at the interview, said that White is a tough guy, but asserted that he's a better businessman than White, which Undertaker said was in no doubt. Given the lifestyle that Mark Calloway was awarded by years of working for Vince McMahon, his loyalty is hardly a surprise, and while Vince and White may be two alpha males, they seem to be getting along just fine. More from Fight Night, and as we mentioned, Vince McMahon and The Undertaker were present for the Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury fight, which saw Ngannou use the Superman punch. During commentary, they said that Ngannou told us he would do a Superman punch, and somewhere Roman Reigns is smiling, as the commentary table acknowledged their tribal chief. This was certainly not something fans expected to see, and while Ngannou lost the fight, he certainly left an impression with Roman Reigns' finishing move. During their time in WWE, Melina and Candice Michelle were hardly what you'd call friends, with Michelle having spoken in the past about the duo's disagreements. At a recent convention, Michelle and Melina were on a panel together, and Candice thought this would be a perfect time to bury her former colleague. In a video that's been going viral, Michelle was talking about how she came into the business, and when Melina was about to speak, Michelle cut her off to say that she was still talking. Candice then said that Melina was incredibly difficult to work with, and recalled Melina asking her why she was telling people that at the time, which Michelle said was simply the truth. Melina sat at the convention looking awkward as Candice buried her wrestling, and the whole scene made for an awkward moment at the convention. The pair may not have worked together for years, but it's clear there's still a rift between the two, and who knows when, if ever, these two will make amends. At a WWE live event in Berlin, Germany, the Judgment Day defended the undisputed WWE Tag Team titles against the New Day, and while the heels won, there were plenty of issues at ringside. When Rhea pushed JD McDonough backwards so she could lean on the ring, the Irish Ace returned the favor, and the two quickly argued while Dominic Mysterio tried to play peacekeeper. Despite the disagreement, the Judgment Day left Berlin still with the gold in a packed show which came shortly after WWE announced next year's Battle in Berlin. Elsewhere on the card, Ludwig Kaiser and Giovanni Vinci of Imperium defeated Chad Gable and Otis in a tag team match, while Gunther got a win over Bronson Reed. Cody Rhodes would defeat The Miz despite being attacked by a steel chair-wielding Damian Priest on this week's Raw, while Seth Rollins would end the Berlin show with a win over Shinsuke Nakamura. JD McDonough has often helped the Judgment Day out, but has often been a hindrance to the group. And after what happened in Berlin, don't expect Rhea Ripley to be offering an invitation to the Irish superstar. And we're ending with AEW as on this week's Dynamite, Ric Flair made his AEW debut as Tony Khan's gift to Sting, 2 years or so after the Nature Boy was going to be brought into the company. Flair's debut comes amid Sting's retirement tour, with the Icon planning to hang up his boots after AEW Revolution 2024, and Flair will be right by his side for the ride. On Twitter, Sting shared that Flair put him on the map when he was starting off in wrestling, and that the two-time WWE Hall of Famer will be with me every step of the way to the end. Sting added that he and Flair will go out together in a blaze of glory, in another indication that this week's debut by the Nature Boy wasn't a one-off. At this time, Flair hasn't publicly been announced for any future AEW events, but if Sting is to be believed, we can expect to see much more of the dirtiest player in the game very soon.